In most places, junk food means greasy chips and sugary sodas that make your dentist cry. But when you're living in negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit temperature that would freeze a polar bear's eyebrows, you need something a little more substantial. The Arctic isn't your typical snacking environment. It's a place where nature turns every breath into a miniature snowstorm, and your morning coffee freezes before you can start drinking. At these brutal temperatures of negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit, even the simple act of eating becomes an extreme sport. Forget about casually munching on chips or unwrapping a candy bar, because those everyday snacks turn into tooth-shattering hazards faster than you can blink. But while modern junk food surrenders to the cold, traditional Inuit snacks actually thrive in it. These aren't your regular convenience store treats. They're high-energy, nutrient-packed powerhouses that laugh in the face of freezing temperatures. When the environment is harsh enough to freeze spit before it hits the ground, you need food that can take the punch and punch back with calories. In fact, one of their traditional snacks will make you completely rethink what counts as a treat. Let's talk about muktuk. That's whale blubber for those who don't speak Arctic. It's basically nature's energy bar, except instead of coming wrapped in colorful packaging, it comes wrapped in whale skin. Nutritionists would actually have a field day with this stuff. A single 3.5-ounce portion of muktuk packs around 450 calories, which is like eating 2 regular chocolate bars, except this one's actually good for you. It's loaded with vitamin C, vitamin D, because who needs the sun when you've got whale fat, and enough omega-3s to make a salmon jealous. When you bite into muktuk, it doesn't just melt in your mouth like chocolate. Oh no, it goes through phases, like a frozen food adventure. First, it's hard as a rock, literally. You could probably use it as an ice scraper in a pinch. Then, as your body heat works its magic, it starts to soften up. The texture changes from, am I going to break my teeth? To, oh, this is actually pretty interesting, in about 30 seconds flat. Seal fat, on the other hand, is like the butter of the Arctic. Instead of spreading butter on bread, traditional Inuit people would just eat the fat. Straight up, no bread needed. It's like nature's energy gel, except instead of coming in those tiny packets marathon runners use, it comes in chunks that could keep you going for days. A pound of seal fat contains about 4,000 calories. That's like eating 15 Big Macs, except this actually helps you survive when it's cold enough to freeze your eyelashes together. But here's what they don't tell you in the tourist brochures. Getting this stuff isn't exactly like running to the corner store. These traditional fatty snacks are the result of successful hunts that take incredible skill and patience. Hunters sometimes wait for hours by seal breathing holes in the ice. Talk about working for your food. The hunters have to be completely silent and still, sometimes for hours on end. One sneeze, and that's it. Dinner's gone, and you're back to square one. The preservation method is pretty genius, too. When everything around you is below freezing, you don't need fancy refrigerators or preservatives. Nature takes care of that for you. The cold temperatures actually help maintain the nutritional value of these fatty snacks, keeping them fresh for months. It's like having a gigantic freezer that runs on, well, nothing except the weather. And trust me, at negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit, everything's a freezer. Your jacket, freezer. Your boots, freezer. Your nose, definitely a freezer. And let's talk about the social aspect of these snacks. In Western culture, we might gather around a bag of chips or a bowl of popcorn. In traditional Inuit communities, people would gather around freshly caught seals or whale blubber. The sharing of these energy-rich foods has been a crucial part of Inuit culture for thousands of years. It's not just about eating, it's about community, survival, and tradition, all wrapped up in one fatty package. Once you get past the initial, wait, I'm eating pure fat? moment, many people actually start to enjoy it. Some Arctic researchers and visitors who've tried these traditional snacks report that they're surprisingly satisfying. It's like your body just knows this is exactly what it needs when you're dealing with extreme cold. There's actually science behind this. Your body burns more calories just trying to stay warm in these temperatures, so high-fat foods are exactly what you need. You know how we complain when our ice cream gets freezer burn? That's not really a problem with muktuk and seal fat. They're meant to be frozen solid. In fact, the colder they are, the better they keep. Nature's perfect preservation system at work. And unlike that mysterious Tupperware container in the back of your freezer, there's no guessing game about how long it's been there. These traditional foods can last for months without losing their nutritional value. While we're busy counting calories and worrying about fat content in our snacks, traditional Inuit people have been eating what might be the original keto diet for thousands of years. These high-fat snacks aren't just food, they're survival tools that happen to taste good. Modern nutritionists are actually starting to recognize the wisdom in this traditional diet. It turns out that in extremely cold environments, a high-fat diet isn't just helpful, it's essential for survival. But if you think pure fat is an interesting snack, wait until you hear about this next one. Move over ice cream trucks. The Arctic's got its own frozen treats, and they're nothing like the sugar-loaded popsicles you're used to. In the land where your nose hairs freeze solid, fish isn't just dinner, it's dessert too. Raw, frozen fish might sound like something your cat would dream up, but it's actually one of the most popular snacks in traditional Inuit culture. They call it kwak, which sounds like cock, and it's basically sashimi's hardcore cousin. The fish, usually Arctic char, whitefish, or trout, is caught fresh and left outside where it freezes faster than a teenager's attitude when you ask them to do chores. Here's the wild part. At negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes less than 2 minutes for a freshly caught fish to turn into nature's popsicle. That's faster than it takes most of us to decide what to watch on Netflix. The science behind this snack is pretty fascinating. When fish freezes this quickly, the ice crystals that form are super tiny. This means the fish's cell walls don't get destroyed like they would in your home freezer, where it takes hours to freeze completely. The result? When you bite into it, the texture is nothing like that sad freezer-burned fish fillet you forgot about last summer. This extreme cold actually makes the fish safer to eat raw than most sushi you get at restaurants. At these temperatures, parasites don't stand a chance. They're basically flash frozen into oblivion. The FDA requires fish for sushi to be frozen at negative 31 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 hours to be safe. Meanwhile, Arctic temperatures are like, hold my seal fat, and blast these fish with more than twice that cold, instantly. The eating technique is something else entirely. You don't just bite into it like a regular popsicle. That would be amateur hour. First, you have to use a traditional knife called an ulu to shave off thin slices. Some elders are so skilled they can slice pieces thin enough to see through, like fish-flavored stained glass. Though honestly, most people just gnaw on it like a caveman with a frozen fish club. The trick is knowing exactly how long to let each piece warm up in your mouth. Too quick and you miss the flavors, too long and it turns into fish soup. I tried this once during a visit to northern Canada, and let me tell you, your tongue goes through quite the journey. First, there's the initial shock of, oh my God, I'm eating a fish cycle. Then, as it starts to thaw in your mouth, the flavors slowly release. It's like a time-release fish capsule, if that were a thing. The taste is surprisingly clean and fresh, nothing like the fishy taste you might expect. But what's interesting is the snack. It's basically fast food that carries itself. When you're out hunting or traveling across the ice, you don't need a cooler or fancy packaging. Just grab a frozen fish, stick it in your parka, and you've got snacks for the road. Though, I should mention, don't try this with your winter jacket at home. The smell tends to linger, and you'll end up smelling like a mermaid's gym bag. Temperature management is crucial here. If it's too cold, the fish becomes so hard, you might as well be trying to eat an ice sculpture. Too warm, anything above negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, is practically tropical by these standards, and you lose that perfect crystalline texture. The nutritional value is off the charts too. These Arctic fish are packed with protein and those fancy omega-3 fatty acids everyone's always talking about. Plus, because they're eaten raw, none of the nutrients are lost in cooking. It's like nature's protein bar, except instead of tasting like cardboard and false hopes, it tastes like, well, frozen fish. A typical serving of Arctic char, for example, contains more omega-3s than farmed salmon and nearly twice the vitamin D. Pretty important when you live somewhere that barely sees the sun for months at a time. Different regions have their own favorite fish species for kwak. Some swear by Arctic char, claiming it has the perfect fat content for freezing. Others prefer whitefish for its milder flavor. In some communities, the preparation of kwak is a social event, with families gathering together to clean and prepare the fish fresh from the catch. Kids learn the traditional cutting techniques from their elders, though there's always that one person who tries to show off and nearly loses a finger. Speaking of taste preferences, there's even a rising trend among some Arctic tourism spots offering quack tastings, like wine tastings, but with frozen fish. I can just picture the sommelier now. Ah yes, this 2024 Arctic char has notes of ice with subtle hints of more ice and a delightfully frozen finish. Some adventurous food tourists actually travel thousands of miles just to try authentic quack, though most of them probably weren't expecting their snack to still be looking at them when they eat it. But if you think frozen fish is wild, just wait until you hear about the snack that takes months to prepare. Buried treasure usually means gold and jewels, but in the Arctic, it might just be last summer's walrus meat. Meet iguanak, the snack that makes blue cheese look like amateur hour in the funky food department. The recipe is simple. Take some walrus meat, dig a hole, bury it, wait a few months, and pray to the Arctic gods that you did it right. The whole process is like extreme food aging gone wild. Most people age their wine for a few years. Inuit people age their walrus meat underground for up to 18 months. That's long enough to watch all seasons of your favorite TV show 3 times over. But this isn't your regular, forgot about it in the fridge kind of aging. The meat has to be buried at exactly the right depth where it's cold enough to prevent total rot, but warm enough for controlled fermentation. Too shallow, and you've got a health hazard. Too deep, and you've got a walrus meat popsicle. But it gets interesting when the ground temperature has to stay between 35 degrees Fahrenheit and 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Talk about precision. Getting this temperature right is harder than trying to explain TikTok to your grandparents. The traditional method involves digging until you hit the permafrost layer, then creating a special chamber that's perfectly insulated with stones and moss. It's like building a natural refrigerator, except this one runs on permafrost power and took thousands of years to perfect. The smell? Well, let's just say it's memorable. When properly fermented, iguanak gives off an aroma that could wake up a hibernating polar bear. Scientists have actually studied the fermentation process and found that the same bacteria responsible for that distinctive smell are also what make the meat safe to eat. It's nature's way of saying, if it smells this bad, it must be good for you. Some elders say you can tell if it's ready just by the intensity of the smell, though I'm pretty sure my nose would just wave a white flag and give up. But what's interesting is that making iguanak is considered an art form. Not everyone can do it successfully. It takes years of experience and knowledge passed down through generations. There are Inuit elders who are like the master sommeliers of fermented meat, able to tell just by smell whether it's ready or not. Each family usually has their own secret spot and special technique, handed down like a family recipe, except this recipe could actually kill you if you get it wrong. The location has to be remembered precisely. No GPS allowed here, just good old-fashioned Arctic wisdom. Speaking of getting it wrong, the margin for error is smaller than a penguin swimsuit. If the fermentation goes sideways, you're not just dealing with a ruined snack. You're dealing with something that could make food poisoning look like a walk in the park. That's why traditionally, only experienced elders were trusted with preparing iguanak. It's probably the only snack in the world where the person making it needs decades of experience just to make sure it won't send you to the hospital. But when it's done right, pure Arctic magic. The texture becomes tender, almost buttery, and the taste is, well, unique. Some people describe it as intense, others say it's an acquired taste, kind of like coffee or reality TV shows. The fermentation process breaks down tough muscle fibers and creates new flavor compounds that you won't find anywhere else in the world. It's basically umami cranked up to 11. The meat becomes so tender you could almost spread it on a cracker, if crackers didn't freeze solid and shatter into a million pieces in Arctic temperatures. The nutritional value is off the charts too. Fermented walrus meat is packed with vitamins and minerals that are hard to come by in the Arctic. We're talking about vitamin A, B12, iron, and zinc levels that would make a nutritionist's jaw drop. In fact, one serving of properly fermented iguanak contains more vitamin C than an orange, which is pretty handy when fresh fruit is about as common as a beach party in the Arctic. The fermentation process actually increases the bioavailability of these nutrients, making them easier for your body to absorb. Modern food safety experts get nervous just thinking about iguanak, but here's the thing. This traditional practice has kept Inuit people healthy for thousands of years. The fermentation process, when done correctly, creates an environment where harmful bacteria can't survive, while beneficial bacteria thrive. These beneficial bacteria also help with digestion, though I'm pretty sure your stomach needs a pep talk before dealing with this particular snack. These days, fewer people make traditional iguanak because it's incredibly time-consuming and risky without the proper knowledge. Plus, with modern freezers available, many opt for simpler preservation methods. But in some communities, there are still elders who maintain this tradition, treating each batch like a science experiment mixed with an ancient ritual. They're the keepers of a food preservation technique that's probably older than most countries. Each region has its own variation of fermented meat. Some communities use seals instead of walrus, others have different aging times or burial techniques. And yes, experienced eaters can actually tell the difference, though I'm not sure that's something to brag about at parties. If fermented walrus meat sounds intense, just wait until you hear about the next weird snack. Cloudberries and crowberries grow wild during the brief Arctic summer, popping up like tiny jewels in the tundra. These berries are tougher than your average strawberry. They have to be to survive in a place where the weather could freeze your tears. Cloudberries look like orange raspberries and pack more vitamin C than oranges, about 182 milligrams per 100 grams. That's 4 times what you'd get from an orange. They're basically the Arctic's answer to emergency vitamin supplements, though considerably harder to find at your local pharmacy. The fun starts when you mix these berries with seal oil. Now, before you scrunch up your nose, hear me out. Seal oil is basically the olive oil of the North, except instead of dipping bread in it, you're using it to keep your berries from turning into berry-flavored ice cubes. The oil doesn't just prevent freezing, it also helps your body absorb all those fat-soluble vitamins in the berries. It's like nature's version of those fancy vitamin gummies, except this one could probably survive a nuclear winter. The ratio matters more than you'd expect. Too much oil and you've got berry soup. Too little and you're basically eating frozen marbles. The perfect mix creates something with the consistency of a slightly melted sorbet. Traditional recipes call for about 3 parts berries to 1 part oil, though every family has their own secret ratio. Kind of like how everyone claims their grandma makes the best cookies, except these grandmas are working with seal oil instead of butter. Some families even add a pinch of snow to make it fluffier, though getting the right kind of snow is another art form entirely. Collecting these berries isn't exactly like picking them from your backyard garden. Arctic berry picking is more like an extreme sport. You've got to time it perfectly. Wait too long and they're buried under snow. Go too early and they're not ripe. Plus, you're competing with every bird, fox, and bear in the area who's also trying to stock up for winter. The berry picking season is incredibly short, sometimes just a few weeks, so when it's time to pick, everyone drops everything and heads out. The preservation technique is pretty clever too. Once mixed with seal oil, these berries can last through the entire winter without freezing solid. The science behind it is fascinating. The oil creates a protective barrier around each berry, preventing ice crystals from forming and destroying the fruit's cell walls. It's the same principle fancy ice cream makers use to keep ice cream smooth, except this method has been around for thousands of years. The oil also helps prevent oxidation, keeping the berries' nutrients intact much longer than they would last on their own. Different regions have their own favorite berry combinations. Some swear by pure cloudberries, while others mix in crowberries for a more complex flavor. Up north, they sometimes add mashed caribou fat to the mix, turning it into something that's halfway between a dessert and an energy bar. The taste? Well, it's unique. The berries are surprisingly sweet, with the oil adding a richness that you definitely don't get in your average fruit salad. Some people describe it as a cross between jam and butter, though that doesn't quite capture the complexity of the flavors. Modern nutritionists actually get excited about this combination. The fat from the seal oil helps your body absorb not just the vitamins from the berries, but also their antioxidants. One study found that eating berries with traditional fats increased the absorption of certain nutrients by up to 600%. That's like turning your snack into a supercharged health bomb, which is pretty handy when the nearest grocery store is hundreds of miles away, and Amazon Prime doesn't exactly offer next-day delivery to the Arctic Circle. This dish actually changes flavor as you eat it. The oil slowly separates from the berries in your mouth, creating a taste experience that goes from sweet to savory. First-timers often describe it as interesting, which we all know is the polite way of saying, I'm not sure what's happening in my mouth right now. But those who grow up with it absolutely love it. often craving it when they're away from home. Storage is an art form too. Traditional containers are made from sealed animal bladders or stomach linings, nature's Tupperware, if you will. These containers are actually perfect for the job, being naturally waterproof and surprisingly durable. Modern plastic containers work too, but they tend to crack in extreme cold, which means you might end up with seal oil-soaked pockets. Not exactly the kind of oil stain you want to explain to your dry cleaner. The traditional containers also have the advantage of being biodegradable, though they might raise a few eyebrows if you bring them to a modern potluck. But if you think this is an unusual way to get your daily vitamins, just wait until you hear about their weird drink. Blood for breakfast might sound like a vampire's meal plan, but in the Arctic, it's actually the original energy drink. Tuktusavig, or reindeer blood soup, makes your morning coffee look about as energizing as tap water. Before Red Bull gave people wings, Inuit hunters were powering through brutal Arctic conditions with this iron-rich superfood. Let's talk numbers for a second. 1 cup of reindeer blood contains about 800% of your daily iron needs. That's like eating 8 steaks in one go, minus the food coma. Your average energy drink has about 80 milligrams of caffeine. Cute. A bowl of blood soup gives you enough iron to power through a whole day of hunting in negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit weather, where just breathing feels like an Olympic sport. And unlike modern energy drinks, there's no sugar crash waiting to ambush you 2 hours later. The recipe is surprisingly simple, though maybe don't try to recreate it for your next dinner party. Fresh reindeer blood, caribou works too. They're basically the same animal with different PR teams, and they get mixed with chunks of fat and a bit of meat. Some hunters add snow or water to thin it out, but that's considered rookie moves by the elders. The real pros drink it straight up, usually still warm from the hunt, because nothing says breakfast of champions quite like a thermos of warm blood soup. Here's what drives modern nutritionists crazy with excitement. This stuff is basically a perfect energy food. The iron from the blood helps carry oxygen through your body. The fat provides sustained energy, and the protein helps rebuild muscles. It's like someone designed the perfect pre-workout drink, except this one's been around since before we invented agriculture. The iron in blood is also more easily absorbed than iron from plants or supplements. Your body's basically getting a direct deposit of energy. No processing fees required. Hunters have some pretty strong opinions about proper blood soup etiquette. According to tradition, the first cup always goes to the most experienced hunter, kind of like how we let Grandpa carve the turkey at Thanksgiving, except with more blood and less awkward family conversations. The blood has to be used fresh, no storing it in your fridge for later. This isn't like a meal prepping your weekly smoothies, it's more of a hunt it, drink it situation. Young hunters are taught exactly how to collect and prepare it, with the same seriousness most of us reserve for learning how to drive. But drinking blood isn't just about nutrition. It's got genuine survival benefits in the Arctic. When you're miles from home and burning through calories like a furnace just to stay warm, blood soup can literally mean the difference between making it back home or becoming a human popsicle. The soup's high temperature helps maintain body heat, while all those nutrients keep your energy level stable. In temperatures where exposed skin can freeze in seconds, this internal heating system is more valuable than a backup phone battery at 1% charge. Modern science has actually backed up what Inuit people have known for generations. A study of traditional Arctic diets found that blood soup consumers had significantly higher iron levels than those who didn't partake, even during the harsh winter months when other food sources were scarce. It's like nature's multivitamin, except you can't get it at your local pharmacy. The study also found that regular consumption helped prevent the kind of anemia that often plagues people living in extreme climates. The color can be a bit intense. We're talking about a deep, rich red that would make a horror movie director jealous. First-timers often need a moment to mentally prepare themselves. It's funny, we'll happily eat rare steak, but somehow drinking blood soup seems extreme. Though, I guess if you're going to drink blood soup, doing it in the Arctic makes more sense than, say, ordering it at your local coffee shop between your morning latte and blueberry muffin. Storage and preparation require serious skill too. The blood needs to be collected and used quickly before it coagulates, which in Arctic temperatures can happen faster than a teenager changing their mind about their future career. The soup is usually made right after a successful hunt, with hunters often taking their first energizing sip while they're still processing the rest of the animal. Talk about fast food. And unlike your drive-through burger, this meal's preparation requires incredible precision and timing. Different regions have their own variations. Some communities prefer seal blood to reindeer, while others mix in various organ meats for extra nutrition. Each version has its devoted followers who will swear their recipe is the best. Just don't try to start that debate during hunting season. Some hunters even claim they can taste the difference between blood from different areas, like wine connoisseurs detecting notes of oak and berry, except with more iron and less pretension. Speaking of hunting season, if blood soup seems a bit intense for your taste, you might prefer something a bit more different. Looking for a salad in the Arctic? Well, the closest thing might be the partially digested contents of a caribou's stomach. Before you say "you" and run away, this might be one of the smartest food hacks ever invented. When you live in a place where the only green things are the northern lights, you've got to get creative with your veggie intake. You see, caribou are basically walking salad processors. These animals spend their days munching on lichen, mushrooms, and plants that humans can't digest raw. Their special four-chambered stomach breaks down these tough plants, making them not just edible, but actually super nutritious for humans. It's like having a personal chef who pre-chews your food. If your chef happened to be a 400-pound caribou with impressive antlers and questionable table manners, the science behind this is pretty amazing. Caribou stomachs contain special enzymes and bacteria that can break down cellulose, the tough stuff in plants that human stomachs can't handle. A single caribou stomach can process about 12 pounds of plant matter per day. That's more greens than most people eat in a week. And unlike your average garden salad, this one comes preloaded with probiotics that would make a kombucha look basic. The bacteria in a caribou's gut are so efficient they can break down lichens that would be completely indigestible to humans otherwise. The nutritional value? Off the charts. We're talking about a mixture that's packed with partially digested lichens, mosses, and grasses that are already broken down into their most nutritious form. It's basically the world's most efficient green smoothie, except it was blended in a caribou's stomach instead of your Vitamix. The fermentation process in the caribou's gut also creates vitamin B12, something that's usually hard to get without eating meat. Plus, the mixture is rich in minerals that are otherwise rare in the Arctic diet, making it an essential source of nutrients during the long winter months. Getting to this Arctic delicacy isn't exactly like picking up takeout, though. First, you need to hunt a caribou, which is about as easy as teaching a polar bear to tap dance. Then, you've got to know exactly which stomach chamber to look for. Caribou have 4 of them, and you want the one that's essentially nature's slow cooker. Pick the wrong chamber, and instead of partially digested plants, you might end up with, well, let's just say the other chambers are more like nature's garbage disposal. The right chamber, called the rumen, is where all the magic happens. The traditional way of eating this is pretty straightforward, though straightforward in the Arctic usually means something that would shock everyone else. The stomach contents are often eaten fresh, right after a hunt. Some people mix it with fresh blood or fat to make it more calorie-dense because apparently pre-chewed plants aren't exciting enough on their own. It's like adding salad dressing, except your dressing options are limited to blood or seal fat. Some hunters swear this mixture gives them more energy than any other food they eat, and considering the extreme conditions they work in, that's saying something. Temperature is crucial here. In the Arctic's extreme cold, this mixture can freeze solid faster than you can say, past the stomach contents. That's why it's usually eaten fresh or carefully preserved. Some hunters will actually tuck portions of it inside their parkas to keep it from freezing. Talk about carrying your lunch close to your heart. The heat from their bodies keeps it at the perfect temperature, though it does mean you might smell like partially digested lichen for a while. In the most extreme cold, this body heat preservation method might be the only way to keep food from becoming completely inedible. This food source is available year-round. Even in the dead of winter, when everything's buried under snow and ice, caribou are still munching away on lichens they dig up from under the snow. They're like living preservation machines, keeping summer's plants edible throughout the winter. It's nature's version of canning, except instead of mason jars, you're using caribou stomachs. The caribou's ability to find and process these plants during winter makes them an invaluable source of nutrients during the harshest months. Different regions have their own preferences for how to serve this delicacy. Some communities mix it with berries and fat to make it more palatable. Others prefer it straight up, arguing that adding anything else ruins the unique flavor profile. Young people in some communities are even known to add modern spices to it, though traditionalists usually frown upon such innovations, preferring to keep this ancestral food as authentic as possible. Modern nutritionists are actually studying this traditional food source pretty intensely. Turns out the mix of pre-digested plants and natural probiotics might be better for you than most modern supplements. The caribou's digestive process makes nutrients more bioavailable than they would be in raw plants. Plus, the natural fermentation adds beneficial bacteria that could give your gut health a serious boost. But if you're not quite ready for pre-chewed plants, maybe you'd prefer something a bit more conventional. The best ice cream makers in the world have nothing on Inuit dessert chefs. While Italian gelato might be smooth and Japanese soft serve might be creative, only Arctic people figured out how to make ice cream at negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit without it turning into a tooth-breaking brick. Their secret? Forget cream. We're talking about whipped seal fat that's so fluffy it makes mousse look dense. Akutuk, which literally means something mixed, takes dessert engineering to a whole new level. First, you start with fat, usually from seals, but caribou, moose, or whale fat works too. This isn't just any fat, though. It has to be the perfect kind from specific parts of the animal. Getting it wrong is like using salt instead of sugar in your cookie recipe, except this mistake might actually freeze your tongue to the roof of your mouth. The fat needs to be fresh, and from areas where it's soft and easy to whip. The process of making akutuk is basically an Arctic upper body workout. The fat needs to be whipped by hand until it becomes light and fluffy, which at these temperatures is about as easy as giving a polar bear a manicure. It takes hours of rhythmic whipping to get the texture just right. The fat slowly transforms from a solid block into something that looks like whipped cream, except this version won't melt when your heater breaks in winter. Traditional makers develop incredibly strong arms. Forget about gym memberships, just make akutuk 3 times a week. The whipped fat gets mixed with fresh snow, and not just any snow. It has to be the clean, powdery kind, berries, and sometimes even meat. The sugar content in modern versions can get pretty high. We're talking about 15 to 20% sugar by weight. That's like eating a candy bar, except this one actually helps you survive in the Arctic. The berries aren't just for flavor either. They're packed with vitamin C, which helps prevent scurvy. It's basically a survival multivitamin disguised as dessert. Some traditional recipes even include medicinal plants, making it the original functional food. Temperature control is crucial here. Too cold and the fat gets too hard to whip. Too warm and, well, that's not really a problem when it's cold enough to freeze your eyelashes together. The real skill comes in keeping the mixture at just the right temperature while you're whipping it. Some people can tell the perfect temperature just by the sound the fat makes as they're whipping it. It's like having perfect pitch, but for frozen animal fat. Even a few degrees off can change the texture completely. Traditionally, akutuk was a special occasion food, often made for celebrations or to honor successful hunters. These days, some people make a modern version with Crisco instead of seal fat, but that's kind of like making sushi with imitation crab. Sure, it works, but good luck convincing your grandmother it's the real thing. The traditional version packs about 205 calories per ounce. For comparison, regular ice cream only has about 87 calories per ounce. This isn't just dessert, it's survival food in disguise. The texture is what really sets it apart. When made right, akutuk is impossibly light and airy, almost like eating frozen clouds. The fat crystals are so small that they create this smooth, creamy texture that doesn't freeze your mouth like regular ice cream. It's a bit like eating whipped cream, except this version won't turn into a puddle if you leave it out for a few hours. In fact, it's so stable that hunters can carry it for days without it losing its texture. The air bubbles trapped in the whipped fat act as tiny insulation pockets, keeping the whole thing at a consistent temperature. Different regions have their own signature versions. Some add ground fish, others mix in caribou meat, and some stick to just berries. It's like how every Italian grandmother has her own secret pasta sauce recipe, except these recipes have been keeping people alive in the Arctic for thousands of years. Some modern versions even include things like crushed crackers or corn syrup, though traditionalists tend to roll their eyes at these additions. In some communities, specific akutuk recipes are closely guarded secrets, passed down only within families. The science behind akutuk is fascinating. The microscopic structure of animal fat, when whipped properly, creates tiny air pockets that act as insulation. This means the dessert can actually help keep you warm while you're eating it. It's like having a tiny edible space heater, except this one tastes better and won't run up your electric bill. The high-fat content also helps your body absorb fat-soluble vitamins from the berries and other ingredients, making it surprisingly nutritious. But if traditional akutuk might push the boundaries of what we consider treats, there's another part of the story that will show what if Inuit have adapted to changes. Modern snacks face some pretty hilarious challenges in these temperatures. A Mars bar becomes harder than a hockey puck. The only way to eat it is to warm it up under your armpit first. It's a real test of how badly you want that chocolate. Potato chips shatter like glass. One wrong bite and you're basically eating razor blades. Even the bags they come in turn into crispy plastic weapons that could probably cut through steel. The freezing points of different sodas create a weird snack hierarchy. Regular Coke freezes at about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but Diet Coke turns to slush at 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Those few degrees make Diet Coke the slightly more Arctic-friendly choice. Not that it matters much when the temperature outside could freeze your tongue to your teeth. Energy drinks are even worse. They turn into caffeinated ice bombs that could probably wake you up just from the shock of them exploding in your face. Then there's the storage problem. You can't just leave snacks in your car anymore. That's basically turning it into a deep freezer that could rival NASA's cryogenics lab. A forgotten chocolate bar in the glove compartment becomes a dangerous projectile that could do some serious damage if you break too hard. And don't even think about keeping cans of anything in there unless you enjoy cleaning up frozen soda explosions. The temperature changes the entire snacking experience. Gummy bears? They're now tooth-breaking pebbles that could probably be used as construction materials. Candy bars need a 15-minute warming period before they're safe to eat. It's like having to defrost your snacks the same way you defrost a chicken. Some people have developed elaborate systems involving multiple pockets. The outer pocket for initial warming, then moving to an inner pocket for the final thaw. At these temperatures, the sugar coating on candies like M&Ms can actually separate from the chocolate inside. The different ingredients freeze at different rates, creating this weird effect where the candy shell pops off like a spacecraft dropping its heat shield. Scientists actually study this kind of rapid freezing behavior to understand how materials behave in extreme conditions. Who knew your snack could be contributing to science? Modern packaging isn't designed for these conditions either. Plastic wrappers become so brittle they'll crack if you look at them wrong. Opening a bag of chips requires the delicate touch of a surgeon combined with the strength of a weightlifter. Some people have resorted to using hunting knives to open their snacks, which probably makes nutritionists nervous, but is actually safer than trying to tear them open with your teeth. The convenience store experience is totally different too. The cold drink section is actually the warmest part of the store. They have to keep beverages above freezing or risk a mass explosion of cans. Meanwhile, the warm snack aisle is basically a frozen food section. Ice cream doesn't even need a freezer. They could probably display it on regular shelves and it would stay frozen until summer. The most bizarre part is that some snacks actually taste different at these temperatures. The extreme cold numbs your taste buds, so everything tastes a bit off. Plus, the chemical reactions that create flavor happen more slowly when it's super cold. That's why Arctic residents often stuff snacks in their mittens or pockets to warm them up first. Not just to make them edible, but to make them actually taste like they're supposed to. Adaptation is key. People have learned to crush their favorite snacks before opening the bag, preventing the explosive shattering that comes with the first bite. Some carry thermoses of warm water just to make their candy bars edible. Others have mastered the art of the pocket rotation system, moving snacks between layers of clothing to achieve the perfect eating temperature. It's like a game of hot potato, except it's more like trying to make this potato not freeze solid. But while modern snacks struggle in the Arctic cold, the traditional foods we've talked about handle it like champs. Makes you wonder who the real junk food experts are. After all, these aren't just random recipes. They're the result of generations of Arctic ingenuity, created by people who understood their environment down to the last frozen detail.